Hello everyone. In this short video lecture, I am going to do a quick review of input in Java, both the text input and graphical user interface input. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about wrapper classes. And using input, I'm going to show the motivation behind wrapper classes and show a couple of the things that they can do. So first, briefly, let's talk about input review. So when we are doing text input, we are using scanner. We've talked about this since the first week of classes. Now, the scanner, remember, is not part of the core Java language. We need to import scanner. We need to import it from the java.util package. So whenever we have a scanner that we are going to use, this import statement at the top, java.util.scanner, we have to have this. If we don't have this, the code for the scanner is not imported into our project, and we won't be able to capture any data, any input. So I'm going to have my initialization statement. I'm going to scanner in equals the new keyword, and then scanner, followed by system.in. Now remember, system.in is our keyboard. System.in is going to be scanning for, listening for input on the keyboard. And then it will capture that input into the buffer, into the scanner buffer. And then when we call some of these scanner methods, it will take data out of that buffer. So the scanner methods that we have, that we've talked about, is to get integers out of the scanner, we would call the next int method. If we wanted to get a double out of the scanner, we would call the next double method. If we wanted to get just a single word, the first word that is in the scanner, we would call the in.next. It actually gets the next token. So whatever set of characters that is not white space, it will grab, and then it will put that into our string. If we want to get everything that we have typed into the scanner from the buffer into some variable, we are going to use the next line method. This takes everything, clears out the buffer. Now it's important to note that the first three of these, the next int, next double, and next methods, do not remove the new line character. So for example, if I was trying to capture an integer for variable a, I would type 23 and then I would hit enter. Hitting enter puts a new line character in the buffer. That's what enter is. Return or enter is a new line character. So this is what is in the buffer at the moment. When I hit enter, it triggers next int to grab the next integer. So it starts at the beginning of the buffer, gets everything up until the new line character, and throws that into an integer. Now, that means it leaves this new line character in the buffer. This can be an issue if you are switching back and forth between different types of capture. If you are trying to get an integer and then a next line, or a double, an integer and a next, or something like that, because the next line is what triggers these methods to capture the data, this is always going to be stored in the buffer unless you use the next line method. The next line method actually takes everything including the new line character. All the other three just take the characters up until the new line character, or in the case of next, all the characters up until a white space. So my favorite phrase, food is good. Next, if this is what is in the buffer, next is just going to take food, and then it sees a white space, so it stops. So this is going to create what looks like a bug in your code if you don't know that it's there. And I'm going to give you an example of that right now. Okay, so I've entered a very short program, short few lines of code here to demonstrate what I was just talking about. So in this small fragment, I have a scanner, right? I have the same scanner that I have imported and initialized, so this is ready to go. I have a print statement that asks me to enter an integer. I then have a statement that is waiting, the scanner is waiting for me to enter my integer and hit return or enter. Once I do that, once I hit enter, once the new line character is there, again, just to recap, if I do 23, it's going to be 23, and I hit enter, it'll be a new line character. This is what is in the buffer. So when this method runs, when the next int runs, it is going to just grab 23, meaning that the new line character is still in the buffer. So it's going to take 23, it's going to assign that to A, and then it's going to go to the next line of code, which is enter a sentence. So at this point, the scanner is going to be waiting for me to enter another new line character. So in not next line is going to take everything up until the next new line character. The problem is there's a new line character still there. When next int ran, it didn't remove this new line character. And so as a result, when I run this program, it's going to ask me for my integer. I'm going to enter 23 and I'm going to hit new line. I'm going to hit enter. And it is going to capture 23 and it's going to go to the next line, enter a sentence. Then it's going to go to this line and it's going to trigger immediately because next line looks for the next time it sees a new line character. Well, the new line character is already there. So as far as the computer is concerned, you've already hit enter. So let's just see this in action. So asked me to enter an integer. I entered 23. And then when I hit return, the new line character is going to go in the buffer. And it did. It went in and grabbed it. It then asked for a sentence and then grabbed the new line character and finished. It was done because that new line character was left over from the next int method. Next int method did not clear out the new line character. So as you can see, if you're going to be going back and forth between different types of input, if you're going to be getting numbers like ints or doubles, and then you are going to be using the next line method, you are going to have to make sure that your buffer is cleared out. You're going to have to make sure that the new line character is gone before you ask for input. To do that, we have to have another next line statement. So, for example, you can just put a next line statement right here. If we do this, notice we're not actually capturing any of the data. We're not assigning it to anything. Well, what's going to happen is next int will clear out the 23. Next line will then clear out the. That doesn't look right, but I guess that's right. Next line will clear out the new line character, leaving us with an empty buffer, which is what we want, because then when we ask for another sentence, next line is waiting for that next new line character before it captures everything. So then I'll actually be able to type out my sentence. So then we'll be able to actually see the data that we captured here. So let's give that a try. So now I enter my integer, I hit return, that triggers next int to capture. It captures, and then the in.nextLine will capture the new line character and not send it to anything and not save it, basically clearing out the buffer, so the buffer is empty after that. And now it stops and asks for a sentence, and we're now here. We're waiting for us to enter whatever it is we're going to enter, followed by a new line character. Food is odd. Yeah, there we go. Food is good. I hit enter, and now it captures it, puts it in B, and now here we have our output. Here we have our results. Okay? So really pay attention when you are using a scanner to what you are asking and when you are asking it, because you're going to need to keep track of what is in your buffer. Otherwise, you're going to have situations like this where if I don't have this extra new line character, I will never be able to enter this information. It's just going to keep right on going and grab the new line and assume that we're done. Okay? So that's it for the text input, for the scanner input. So the next thing I want to talk about is the graphic user interface input-output. So we have something called the JOption pane. JOption pane is part of Java Swing, which is the old graphic interface library. We use a new one now, something called JavaFX. So what we're going to use the JOption pane for is not necessarily for graphical interface, but specifically for pop-up windows, for graphic pop-up windows that we can use, that we can just throw in without having a whole other structure for a graphical interface. We won't need any of it. JOption pane gives us a nice ready-made little window that'll pop up and either give us information or take input. So JOption pane is an object. It's a class. You can tell it's a class because it starts with a capital letter. So that means there are methods. So if I use the dot operator, I'll be able to grab methods. I'll be able to use methods from JOptionPane. And these methods are static, meaning I don't have to create a JOptionPane. I can just run these methods. So the first one I want to show is show message dialog. The show message dialog method will ask for two things. It's got two pieces of information. One is, where is your big parent graphical interface? We don't have one. And so we are going to say null. Null is just nothing. It's zilch. It's lack of anything. It's not even zero. It is the absence of anything. So what we're telling it is we have got nothing. We have no parent. We have no parent window. We have no parent class. Nothing. The next thing we want to give it is, what message do we want to show? So we have those two pieces of information we need to pass in as parameters. So we will put in my great message, and that's it. That's all that's going to happen. So I'll comment this stuff out, and then if we run this, what's going to happen is it is going to create a pane, a little window, that is just a message dialog, all by itself because there's no parent. It's going to display this message, and it's going to have a little button to say, okay, we're done, to close it. So let's just see what it looks like. And there it is. That's the JOptionPane. There's my message. And OK, when I click OK, the message goes away, and then the program is done. So that is the JOptionPane show message dialog. This is the analog. This is the parallel version of system.out.print, except it is in a little message dialog, a little window that pops up. Now for input, that's a little different. It's the same basic idea as a scanner, except we're going to use a JOptionPane method to do this. So I'm going to create a string that is going to take input. The input is going to come from my JOptionPane. And this time, instead of show message dialog, we're going to have something called show input dialog, which only has one component. Only one parameter. I only need to give it a message, whatever it's going to print out. So I will say enter your name. So now when I run, I'm going to have my great message pop up, and then another window is going to pop up, a JOptionPane window is going to pop up, ask me to enter my name and have an area that I can enter text. Okay. Now JOptionPane will only accept strings as text. So no matter what you put in there, whether it's numbers or letters, it's going to be a string. So let's just see how that works real quick. So first comes my great message. So that's okay. And then the next thing that's going to happen is the input pane, the input JOptionPane. So I can enter my information and it will store it in my string. Okay. And that's, so now it is stored in the string. Now, this leads us into wrapper classes. What happens if I want to get some information that is numeric? I ask for something like, give me an integer. Well, in Scanner, we can just use nextInt and it'll grab it and it'll convert it to an integer and put it into an integer variable. Well, I just said that JOptionPane show input dialog only works with strings. So we need something that's going to convert a string, if a string is just a string of numeric digits, into whatever type of numeric value we need. And so that's where wrapper classes come in. Wrapper classes are used for primitive variables. We have a number of different wrapper classes, and once you see one, you'll be able to use the same pattern for all of them. So we will do the integer wrapper class. The integer wrapper class creates a class very much like a string that has a bunch of methods that you can use on an integer value. So this integer class will be able to store an integer value, an actual int primitive, but then it also has methods that go along with it. So imagine instead of just pointing to that one section of memory where there is an int with a value, that value is now part of a much larger class, much larger object that has that integer value, but then has a bunch of other methods and things along with it. So the way we will use this integer class, we're not just going to create an integer in or anything. Now, integer or something like that. We're not just going to create a new integer class. We are going an integer object, excuse me. We are going to use that, the integer methods, the integer static methods, where we do not have to create an actual integer. We don't have to instantiate an integer object. We can just use the methods. We're going to use those to convert our string into an integer. So I'm going to say enter my age instead. So I have to save this as a string. Remember, only thing that comes out of the input dialog is a string. So even if I'm putting in a number, it's going to save it as a string. At this point, I want it to be an integer. I want to be able to store it and then use it as an integer in my program. So what I'm going to do is use the integer wrapper class, and we have this method called parseInt. ParseInt essentially will take whatever string I put in here, and it will try its best to convert it to a number. So if I enter an age, and it's a string in here, and it's all numbers, it's all whole numbers, integer.parseInt will take those whole numbers in the string. So if I, for example, entered 29, because that's been my age for the last number of years. If I enter this, enter 29, this parseInt method is going to take this string 29, because this is a string. It is going to look at each character in the string. It's going to convert it to a digit, and then it's going to combine them to create an actual integer value that it is then going to output. So this method is going to return an integer value of whatever the string represents. Okay? So by doing that, I would then be able to increase my age, for example, and then print out the new age, like, let's see, your new age is, and then add the age to it. Okay? So let's see this work. We don't need to see my message, my great message, even though it is a great message. So here we go. Input, enter your age. I am going to enter my age, and then I'm going to hit OK. It is going to store that string into the string variable. It's then going to take that string variable that's storing this string 29. The parseInt method is going to parse it into an integer with a value of 29. It's going to store it in the variable age. Age is then going to get incremented with postfix increment, and then it's going to print out my new age. My new age is 30. Now, if I wanted to be completely gooey, I could have used a show message dialog to show my new age, but I didn't. So this is what wrapper classes are. There's an integer wrapper class, double wrapper class, character, char, character wrapper class, float, long. So with the exception of Boolean, all of the primitive variable types, that store values, they all have wrapper classes that have these methods built in, parseInt, parseDouble, and there's more, but this is the main one that I want you all to know for now. So to sum up the wrapper class, these are classes, these are objects that contain information about these primitive variable types, things that we can do with them, methods that we can use to either create an integer or take an integer and do things with it. These wrapper classes have static methods. Again, static methods do not have to have an instance of an object created to be able to use them. In this case, I have to say, go to the integer class and then look for this method, but I don't have to instantiate an integer to run this method. And that is largely how we will be using wrapper classes in this class. There are other things that they can do, certainly, but this is the takeaway I wanted you to have. Okay? All right, so that is it for this shorter lecture. I'm going to have another lecture that I would like you to watch about tracing code, and that will be the second half of this lecture overall. So that's it for here, and I will talk to you soon.